Hey there, welcome back to another video. This time around, it is my review of the 2013 comedy film, This Is the End. Now, I actually saw this in the theater when it came out, and I had fun with it. And in all honesty, I still enjoy this movie. I do think that it is a film, though, that gets a little worse each time you watch it. Like, it's one of those movies where it's still entertaining because of the cast and because of the concept, but it's not really a comedy that is consistently funny, and that becomes really obvious the more times that you watch the film when it comes to how many moments are just full of dead space and the cast trying to do a bunch of improv and none of it working. But because of the strength of the concept and the strength of its cast, I still think it's one of the better comedies of the 2010s. Now, before I get around to sharing more of my thoughts on the film, though, I want to give a special shout out to Bronson for requesting this review. And if there is another film, TV show, or topic that you would like to see me discuss in the future, feel free to donate to either my PayPal, my Patreon, or my Cash App. The links to all three are in the video description down below, and I will try to get your requests as soon as I possibly can. Now, This Is the End is directed by Seth Rogen and Evan Goldberg, and it's based on a short film called Jay and Seth versus the Apocalypse. And Seth and Evan really liked that concept, and so they decided to turn it into a feature film. And the direction by the two, I think, is pretty good. I think when it comes to some of the more epic moments in the film, dealing with the rapture or demons that are running around in this film's version of Hell on Earth, uh, the direction definitely has a certain dynamic punch to it. And I think when it comes to some of the more crazy bits of physical comedy, I think the direction is definitely something that works quite well. But there are some moments where it's just the characters spending time together in James Franco's house, and there are some moments where the direction is a bit strained and kind of stiff. Uh, and I think it might just really be due to the limitations of the fact that they're just stuck in one place. But I still feel for the most part the direction is good. But I do think that there are some moments where it can be a little flat. Also, I think Seth and Evan definitely could have done a little bit better of a job in terms of telling the cast to, stop the linorama bullshit. Because that definitely did affect the film, um, in my opinion. But the direction, it's still good. It's still a relatively well directed movie for the kind of film that This Is the End is. Now, the film is written by Seth Rogen and Evan Goldberg. And to me, the script is another element of the movie that is good but not great. The overall premise, the concept of the film, I think is honestly pretty clever and fun. It's a nice twist on a apocalypse film, but instead of it starring a bunch of made up characters, it's starring exaggerated parody versions of real life celebrities, which I think is honestly a really clever concept. And I think it does a great job in terms of establishing characters early on, especially when it comes to Seth and Jay and their friendship. And so when things really do start to go to hell and hell is freezing over and there's sinkholes opening up and swallowing the celebrities whole, and the rapture happens. It's something that is a bit surprising in terms of the way that it ultimately unfolds at the beginning of the film, even though it is marketed as an apocalyptic film and it's called This Is the End. I still think it does a good job and sort of when it comes to kind of lulling you into this false sense of security in terms of when things are gonna go to hell in a handbasket. And it has a lot of fun with the celebrity skewering, and it leads to some really funny moments at James Franco's house party prior to the sinkhole opening up and sending all these celebrities to hell. You have just multiple moments of Michael Cera as this coked up asshole that are honestly laugh out loud funny. And he is just such a over the top inverse of what his normal personality is that it's just so much fun to watch Michael Cera play against type when it comes to his short role in this movie. I mean, even when he's dying after getting impaled by a street lamp, he is still acting like a prick. 'Cause he's all like he's still pissed off about his phone and upset that somebody stole his phone, and then the phone starts ringing in his pocket, and then he's like, "Oh man, I look like an asshole." And then he winds up getting crushed by the lamp and then dies. Like it's really funny. And just how self-serving and how selfish the celebrities are when the pit opens up and they're holding on for dear life and they're literally tossing other celebrities into the pit in order to uh, preserve their own lives is typical celebrity nonsense. And it's just fun to see these celebrities be willing to be open about it and be like, yeah, I would do that. I would be that guy. Like Kevin Hart would probably kick Aziz in the face in order to prevent himself from going to hell. Um, and early on, you establish a dynamic between Seth and Jay, but you also establish that the awkward dynamic between Jay and Jonah or Jay and James, and you establish all of these characters early on you're going to spend most of the film with, and you establish the dynamic in a way where you're already having fun. You're already enjoying hanging out with these guys. You're enjoying being in the same room with these exaggerated, fictionalized versions of James Franco, Jonah Hill, Seth Rogen, Jay Baruchel, Craig Robinson, and eventually Danny McBride, who shows up later on in the film after everything is just going absolutely insane in Los Angeles, where there's fires and there's the rapture and the whole rapture scene at the convenience store. By the way, with Jay and Seth is honestly really great. I think it's a great bit of spontaneous what the fuck craziness. And this script is honestly at its best when it's doing things like that. When it has these moments of WTF, what the hell, like the scene with the guy who's trying to get into James Franco's house later on after the guys have uh barricaded themselves in and he gets his head chopped off. And then they start kicking his head around on the floor. And then they're even commenting like, "Oh god, this is so gross. You're kicking his head around like a soccer ball." Like, that is definitely when, the script is, in my opinion, the funniest, is when you have those moments, or when Craig Robinson and Jay are going out to try to get some water and some food, and they encounter this giant, a demon bull, and they have to run away from it, and there's just a lot of things, in, this, script when it comes to the outrageousness of it that are, genuinely humorous and clever. Uh, the Emma Watson cameo, especially the bit where she eventually steals all their shit because she overhears a conversation that's very awkward that Jay, started about trying to make it clear that no one's gonna rape her, and then, of course, that leads to everybody being dumb about it and making it kinda sound like yeah, it's something that one of them could potentially do, and they start blaming each other, or they start pointing fingers, and they start being like, "Well, if anyone's gonna rape anybody, it's gonna be Danny." And of course, Danny's like, "What the fuck, man? No, I'm not the one that mentioned this shit. Jay's the one that mentioned it, you know." And so just the way that it just completely devolves into just awkward bickering is very natural and funny in a warped way, and there's other conversations like that throughout the film and the screenplay that I also do enjoy. And there's also references to other different films that these actors have been a part of, and I like that it really does provide all of these different versions of these celebrities with their own distinct personalities, and it provides them with arcs. You have James Franco, who actually gets to the point where he does enough to get an entry into heaven, but because he's selfish and because he's honestly more than a little bit of an asshole, he doesn't get into heaven, and instead he gets eaten by Danny McBride and this band of cannibals. And Danny McBride is straight up a villain. I mean, the way that he makes his entrance is just full of just "fuck you" attitude. Just shows up at the house and starts just eating all the food and drinking all the water and doing all this just, obnoxious, villain, shit. I mean, he even walks in to, a rap song that's usually used for, somebody just being a total thug, and it fits his personality, and it's a lot of fun to actually watch him be the asshole villain, in it. In fact, I wish he was given more time to fully develop into this supervillain character that he ultimately became, by the end of the movie. And then, of course, you got Seth Rogen and you got Jay, these two friends who seem like they're very close at the beginning, but then you find out later on that they kind of have been drifting apart a little bit, and they've both been doing some uh, messed up shit behind each other's backs, and they're not perfect, but they make things work, and they patch up their friendship in time for them to get an entry to heaven. Craig Robinson's character, he starts out one way, but then he starts to become very introspective and really starts to realize that this shit is for real and this is really the apocalypse and I need to take it seriously. And I've done some bad shit in my life and I need to atone for it. And he's the first one that goes to heaven. And I like that it was set up not as a typical survival film too, where initially it seems like, oh, it's going to be how are they going to survive the apocalypse, and instead it was like how are they going to get off of Earth? Like how are they going to get to heaven? Um, and who's going to get an entry to heaven for doing the right good deed, and who is going to stay here on hell and earth? And I think that was definitely the right choice. And that ties into how Jonah Hill's character is written, which I also liked. It was another way of playing against type. He's normally this sweet guy, and here he's a two-faced bastard. Like, he's such a two-faced piece of shit that he's praying to God to kill Jay at one point, which then leads to him getting possessed by a demon. But that does tie into some of my issues with the script, though. There are some moments where it relies a little bit too much on crass humor, because that was something that was very much a common, popular thing around this time, post Hangover. Like, oh, it's so funny. They're talking about jizzing everywhere and jizzing all over the house. Or when Jonah Hill gets possessed by a demon, we have a big shot of the demon's cock and balls. Or later on, when Seth and Jay are trying to get away from this giant demon, winged demon, you have a shot that shows its giant dick and its testicles. And I'm just like, that's just so childish and sophomoric and just lazy, low hanging fruit when it comes to the comedy. And it really hurts the film when it comes to the comedic bits. Like, this is supposed to be a comedy, and there are moments where it's relying way too much on the crass humor, way too much on the characters improvising things or riffing stuff, and it leads to decent chunks of the film just not really providing enough laughs. And then you have the climax, which there are things about it that I do like. I like how you think James Franco's character is gonna go to heaven, but then no, because he flips off Danny McBride and cusses him out, and then it winds up blowing up in his face. And I like how that is also a bit of foreshadowing that has come to fruition, because earlier on they were talking about their idea for Pineapple Express 2, and Danny McBride came up with the idea that his character from that movie was going to eat James Franco's face. And so that actually does happen in this climax when James Franco gets his face eaten by Danny McBride and his band of cannibals, um, which includes Channing Tatum as Danny McBride's bitch, which is also another bit of foreshadowing. That's another thing about the script that I did like. There were some nice bits of foreshadowing that you'll notice with rewatches. The news broadcast talking about the sinkholes early on in the film. The song that's playing in the convenience store is a cover of Blondie's song Rapture. And there's other moments like that throughout the script that I felt were pretty clever. Of course, the Backstreet Boys, like, that is actually something that's referenced earlier on, and then it winds up being a pretty big thing in the last sequence of the film, when everybody is dancing in heaven to Backstreet's Back, the Backstreet Boys song. And all of that being said, though, like I was talking about earlier, the climax still has some issues for me, even though there are things about it that work. James Franco getting his comeuppance, which, knowing how much of a genuine prick he is in real life, like, that's definitely something that's a little cathartic to watch nowadays. And not only that, you have the whole stuff with Seth and Jay and how they find a way to go to heaven, which I did enjoy, and the I thought it was a good use of the Whitney Houston song "I Will Always Love You" as well. But Danny McBride, his character was built up to be just such a massive dick bag that you're expecting some kind of huge comeuppance or a bit of just desserts for him, and it never happens. he eats James Franco's face, and then that's the last you see of this character. I guess originally Seth and Evan had ideas to have him and James Franco in hell smoking weed with Adolf Hitler, which I don't understand that. That would have been a little too much if you ask me. But apparently they did have ideas to show what ultimately happens to him, but they didn't do that bit and they didn't come up with anything to replace it. I think in all honesty, they should have set it up where that big giant winged demon that winds up getting hurt by the heaven light beams when Seth and Jay are brought up to heaven. I think it would have been a great idea to have that demon fall on top of Danny McBride and his cannibal band, like his roving band of cannibals, and just crush them all. And I feel that would have been more than satisfying enough. But the way that it's set up, there's no satisfying comeuppance for him. So it just feels like it's kind of a weak way to conclude his arc, when everyone else has a pretty clear way that their arc is concluded. I mean, Jonah Hill gets possessed by a demon that gets lit on fire. Uh, James Franco gets eaten by Danny McBride. Seth and Jay, they find a way to really let bygones be bygones and reconnect and work through their issues, and it enables them to go to heaven as a result. And Craig Robinson, his character is willing to sacrifice himself for the greater good, and that leads to him getting his path to heaven. And then of course you get, this big Backstreet Boys finale, where the Backstreet Boys perform Everybody. And that was actually something that Seth and Evan did last minute, because apparently the original ending was just the light beams and then it faded to black. And I agree with the test audiences. That just felt like a weak ending. So they got the Backstreet Boys to agree to do the cameo, and they shot the ending when they are all in heaven. And I think that was definitely the right choice, because I really like that scene, actually. I'm not even the biggest fan of the Backstreet Boys, but that's a pretty catchy song, and it's got some good energy to it. And I definitely do feel that that was a good way to end the film, to end it on a high note. But there are still some things that I really wish could have been handled a little bit better. Another one is Emma Watson's character. It seems like she's going to be a bigger part of things, but then she's just not in the film anymore. But apparently there's a reason for that. She was uncomfortable with the cannibalism stuff, which I kind of don't get, to be honest. It's not real, Emma. It's a movie. They're not endorsing cannibalism by having the cannibalism scenes. It's all corn syrup and latex, and it's not real. I don't understand. Like, she was so uncomfortable with it that she left the set. I was like, really? Like, I would get if she's uncomfortable with some of the jokes and some of the ways that the guys are improvising on the set, or just the environment, but she left because she was uncomfortable with the cannibalism scenes. Like, I mean, you read the script, didn't you? Like, you knew it was in there when you signed on to do the film, I would think. So why is that a problem now? Like, I just I don't get that. I really don't. So I felt that that was definitely a little disappointing, because there was no payoff to her arc either. But there's enough here. There's enough heart when it comes to the friendship between Jay and Seth, and there's enough comedy moments that are funny. and enough twists on the apocalypse genre that I still think that this script is good, but it could have been great. Now, the cast is easily one of the best things about the movie. A big part of why this film is still enjoyable and fun to watch, despite it having its issues, is because of this cast. I mean, James Franco, Jonah Hill, Seth Rogen, Jay Baruchel, Danny McBride, Craig Robinson, they all have really good chemistry with one another. They have a great rapport. So their banter, their improv, even when it's not the best, they are still full of energy. They're still full of passion. They still have a really strong connection with one another, that it doesn't really affect the enjoyment of the film too much. And then you have all of the other actors and actresses who make cameos, who are also memorable and fun in their own way. Especially Michael Cera. Like Michael Cera, in all honesty, stole every scene that he was in. And there's some other cameos that I think are kind of fun. For instance, Jason Trost, who was in a film called The FP and a bunch of other sequels as this character named Jatro. He actually is in this. He has an uncredited role as Jatro. So this is kind of in the same universe. I wouldn't say kind of, it essentially is in the same universe as the FP, which I think is pretty wild and pretty crazy. Now, the film also features some cinematography by Brandon Trost, who I'm wondering if Brandon and Jason might be related. I'm not entirely sure though. But the cinematography, it's good. I do think at some points though, it's not the best. It could have been a little bit more interesting, could have been a little bit more atmospheric, a little bit more moody, but as it is, it's fine. The editing by Zine Baker, I think, works for the most part, but there are some moments where the editing is not the best. Like, there's a whole scene where the characters get high on drugs, and the way the scene is edited, it's so frenetic, and it just feels like it goes by in like 30 seconds. And so the whole effect of the drugs, the whole comedy of that bit just falls flat. And I think with the better editing, that would have worked a lot better. And there's some other moments throughout the film that I think better, tighter editing would have helped. The music is by Henry Jackman, and it's not something that I would say is some of his best work, but it fits for the film. The score isn't really what the main focus is, though, when it comes to music in the film. The main focus for music in This Is the End is the licensed songs that they use, and there's some really good choices for songs in this. Not just "Everybody" by the Backstreet Boys, but other songs as well. And I think it's a pretty well-paced film. I mean, I don't think it's that boring or too long. I do feel though that there were some deleted scenes that were cut for a legitimate reason, and I'm glad that they were cut out of the movie because that really would have affected the pacing. But I still think that they could have had a few more scenes to finish some arcs or to be a little bit more satisfying when it comes to certain things. But overall, I think it's a fun comedy. I think it's still a pretty fun, enjoyable movie for what it is. And it also apparently was the last film to ever be rented from Blockbuster Video, which I think is honestly a pretty trippy, weird, and kind of cool, not kind of cool, a genuinely cool bit of trivia that This Is the End was the last film that was rented at Blockbuster. So it was the end for Blockbuster when This Is the End was rented at one of the last operating Blockbusters in Hawaii before the company went under. But anyway, that is my thoughts on This Is the End. And as always, thanks for watching, and I will see you later. See ya.